One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For 5 years, while the world watched American rockets, Chinese robots have been quietly working the far side of the moon. Drilling, collecting, returning material no other nation has ever held. And what they brought back is already deciding what the next decade up there will look like. Most people remember the Chinese space program, if they remember it at all, as a latecomer. A country that reached orbit decades after Apollo and spent the years since catching up. That picture is comfortable. It is also out of date by about 10 years. Because there was always a checklist, and China has been working through it in order. One orbiter, Chang'e 1, in 2007, a soft landing and a rover in 2013. Then, in January 2019, a lander named Chang'e 4 sat down on the side of the moon that never turns toward Earth, the first machine from any nation to manage it. 2 years later, Chang'e 5 scooped up rock and flew it home. Every step was announced years in advance. Every one of them landed, roughly on schedule, one at a time. The program reads less like exploration and more like a contractor working steadily through a punch list. And the final item on that list is a human being standing on the surface. Reaching the far side at all was the kind of problem that stops most agencies cold. You cannot talk to a spacecraft there. The whole body of the moon sits between the lander and Earth, blocking every radio signal. So before Chang'e 4 ever launched, China parked a relay satellite called Queqiao out beyond the moon, in a spot where it could see both the far side and home at once, and bounce the signals across. They solved the communication problem first, then landed. That is the pattern with this program. The unglamorous piece gets built before anyone plants a flag. But the punch list was never really about the flag. To see what it was about, you have to look at what came down out of the sky in the summer of 2024. On the 25th of June that year, a capsule drifted into the grasslands of Inner Mongolia under a parachute, carrying 1,935 grams of rock and soil, less than 2 kilograms, about the weight of a laptop. It does not sound like much until you know where it came from. This was the first material any nation had ever pulled off the far side of the moon, scooped out of the South Pole Aitken Basin, the largest and oldest impact scar on the entire lunar surface. The Americans never brought back a gram of it, neither did the Soviets. China has all of it. And within days, the rock did something inconvenient. It broke a number that scientists had treated as settled. 3 separate teams, using 3 different dating methods, examined the volcanic basalt in those grains and arrived at nearly the same answer. The lava erupted around 2.8 billion years ago. Qian Zhang's group at the Chinese Academy of Sciences published the figure in Nature. Zhexian Shui's team put it at 2,830 million years in Science. A third study landed on 2,823. That should not have been possible. The far side is small and heat-starved, and the textbook said it should have frozen solid long before then. The samples even confirmed the source rock was poor in the radioactive elements that keep a world warm from the inside. The lava had no business being that young. It erupted anyway, and it went on erupting for more than 1.4 billion years. A single older fragment in the same scoop ran the other way, back to 4.25 billion years, and fixed the age of the South Pole Aitken impact itself. A collision so violent, it may have torn material straight out of the moon's mantle. Bin Su's team described it as a new anchor for the entire lunar timeline. Sit with what that means. A country preparing to put boots on the moon had just quietly corrected the clock the rest of the world uses to date craters across the solar system. Underneath this sits a puzzle that has bothered scientists for 50 years. The 2 faces of the moon do not match. The side we see is smooth and dark, flooded with ancient lava plains. The far side is pale, battered, nearly without them. Nobody has fully explained why one world wears 2 such different faces. The chang'e 6 grains showed the far side mantle to be strangely, extremely stripped of the elements you would expect, possibly scrubbed clean by the same impact that dug the basin. For the first time, that 50-year question is being attacked with real rock instead of inference. And the only country holding the rock is the one building toward a base. Which is the question the careful science papers stepped around. Why does a nation planning a permanent outpost care this much about billion-year-old lava? Because the missions that dated the rocks were never only dating rocks. They were taking inventory. In the Chang'e 5 soil, a team at the Beijing Research Institute of Uranium Geology found a mineral no one had ever catalogued, a tiny, colorless crystal they named Change Site Y. Locked inside it, helium-3. They found something else in the same samples, a water-bearing mineral holding 417,000 parts per million of water, bound right into the grains. And the water did not appear where everyone had been looking, in the permanent dark of a polar crater. It appeared out in the open, on the flank of an old volcano. Water then may sit almost everywhere across the moon, not only in the frozen traps at the poles. For anyone intending to stay, that one finding redraws the entire map. Helium-3 is the part people get excited about, and it is worth being honest about why. It is close to a perfect fuel for nuclear fusion. A single gram of it, fused with deuterium, would release roughly 164 megawatt-hours of energy and almost no dangerous radiation. The moon may hold 1,000,000 tons of it. Earth has perhaps 15. There is one catch, and it is a heavy one. The reactor that could actually burn helium-3 this way does not exist yet, and might not for decades. So is this the clean energy future, or a very expensive bet on one that may never arrive? No honest person can answer that today. But water and helium were never the destination either. They are supplies. The real question is what they are supplies for. And this is where the quiet decade stops being quiet. China has committed to landing astronauts on the moon before 2030, and the hardware has left the slideshow. On the 11th of February 2026, a Long March 10 rocket ran a low-altitude flight test at the Wenchang launch site. The crew capsule, Mengzhou, and the lander, Lanyue, have already been through emergency escape tests and landing trials. The architecture is patient, the way everything in this program is patient. 2 rockets launch separately. The lander and the cruise ship rendezvous in lunar orbit. 2 astronauts ride down in a 26-ton lander that carries a 200-kilogram rover. While NASA's Artemis program pushed its first crewed landing past 2028 and kept reshuffling the plan, China kept passing tests and saying very little about them. And the people running it say the 2030 date is deliberately cautious. Wu Wairen, the chief designer of the lunar program, has gone on record that the public timeline is set slow on purpose. Read that the way an engineer means it. The real schedule may be tighter than the one they advertise. Underneath all of it, the country's launch tempo has climbed toward 100 orbital flights in a single year, second in the world only to SpaceX. This is not a nation sprinting and hoping. It is a nation pacing itself and keeping margin in hand. The robots, meanwhile, are still moving out ahead of the people. Later, in 2026, Chang'e 7 aims for the rim of Shackleton Crater at the South Pole, carrying a small hopping probe designed to leap into permanently shadowed craters, at least 10 kilometers in a single jump, and test directly for water ice. It is built to get there ahead of NASA's own ice hunting rover. It is already an international flight too, carrying instruments from Egypt, Thailand, Italy, Switzerland and Russia. Then comes Chang'e 8 in 2028, and here the intent becomes impossible to misread. It carries a machine built to 3D print bricks out of raw lunar soil, melting the dust with sunlight funneled down through fiber optic cables. There's even talk of a humanoid robot riding along to handle the assembly. China has already bolted sample bricks to the outside of its space station to weather 3 years of radiation and vacuum. You do not weather test construction materials for a visit. You test them for a building. And the prize is smaller than it sounds, which is exactly what makes the race real. The good ground at the South Pole comes down to a handful of ridges that catch nearly constant sunlight while sitting beside craters full of ice. There are only so many of those spots. The first program to arrive and stay does not simply get there first. It gets to choose the best real estate on the moon and to set the terms for everyone who follows. That building has a name: the International Lunar Research Station. A permanent base China means to stand up in basic form near the South Pole by 2035. The reason it needs a reactor at all is the lunar night. It runs about 14 Earth days, and through it the temperature falls toward -200 Celsius, cold enough to kill unprotected electronics and drain any battery flat. Solar panels are dead weight for 2 weeks at a stretch. A reactor does not care whether the sun is up. Russia builds that kind of hardware better than almost anyone alive, which is why the two programs locked together, with a nuclear plant planned for the surface sometime between 2033 and 2035. And the station was never meant to be a solo venture. China has thrown it open to the world under a plan it calls 555, an invitation to 50 countries, 500 research institutions, and 5,000 scientists. More than a dozen nations have already signed, among them Pakistan, Egypt, South Africa, Venezuela, and Belarus. So while those robots were drilling for ice and dating ancient lava, they were running the survey for a powered, permanent, internationally backed outpost and assembling the coalition that will run it. It has not gone unnoticed. In Washington, the response has mostly been alarm. Congressional hearings have warned in plain language that China could reach the South Pole first and then decide who else is allowed there. A NASA administrator compared it to the way territory gets claimed and fought over on Earth. The strange part is that the Chinese program has done little that is dramatic to earn the panic. It has just kept showing up, on schedule, doing the boring work in the right order. One commentator called the steadiness of it a lesson for the West. The lesson is not subtle. Patience, aimed at the right list, beats urgency, aimed at the wrong one. Which brings us back to where this started, and to the part that should stay with you. For most of the past decade, the story of the moon was told as an American story, measured in Artemis slips and SpaceX launches. The entire time, on the face of the moon that never turns toward us, machines from a single coalition were taking inventory, dating the ground, and testing the bricks. The flag, whenever it comes, will almost be a formality. The decade that decides who writes the rules up there is already being spent. The only question still open is whether anyone was watching while it happened. If this changed how close that future actually feels, stay for the next one.